Hello and welcome back to the MLB DFS Slate Breakdown for Wednesday, July 10th. We are back. We're breaking it down. We got 9 games to go over, or 8 depending on the slate. FanDuel does not have the second game of the doubleheader in it, so they are 1 game less. We do have a ton of really good hitting weather, good home run weather for today's slate. So I think it's going to be a pretty interesting one to break down, and we could see a lot of big scores like we did last night. Now, before we get into the slate, come join us at LineStar. I want to bring your attention to our 7-day free trial through the app stores, either iOS or Android App Store. You can get up to 7 days free. So you can try us out, see what you like, see if you like us, see if you don't. And if you don't, you just cancel it, move on, try, somewhere else. But we are the best value around in this industry, in the DFS and prop betting space. And I think you'll like it if you just give us a try. So now, let's get into the slate. We'll start off going by yesterday's perfect lineups and the winning lineups on both FanDuel and DraftKings. Then we'll jump into some pitchers for today, followed by stacks to consider. Like I said, I think today's going to be a pretty interesting slate. So let's go. Let us get into it. And I also believe I said it was an 8 and a 9 game slate. I just want to correct myself as I was wrong, and it's actually a 9 or a 10 game slate. So I was one off on the number. Sorry about that, but let's get it going. All right, Yusei Kikuchi. He went nuts yesterday. 59 points, 13 Ks, went 7.1 innings. I talked about this yesterday. He is a little boom bust. He hasn't been pitching well, but his stuff is nuts when it gets going. He was in a decent spot. He went really well. Then we have a 2-man red stack, 2-man Mariner stack, and some one-offs. As I said, the lefties versus the Mazer went nuts yesterday. Cal Riley, good old 40 Cal, went up with 2 home runs and a double, had 4 RBIs, 3 runs, put up 54. He just ended up being an absolute must yesterday. And because I didn't have him, I didn't win, unfortunately. Julio Rodriguez went nuts. He is, he's not a lefty, but it's Julio Rodriguez versus a subpar pitcher. So not surprising there. Then that 2-man red stack, some one-offs, got it done. It was all in all a pretty good day. And LMFAO Your Face took home 20K yesterday. They had Sale going for 43. He didn't have that great of a game. He just did enough. Well, I mean, he had a solid game. But I think there were actually a lot of pitchers you could have had yesterday. Sale did really well. Brian Bello had a good game. And then Kikuchi. So any of those 3 could have got you the win yesterday. Bello would have probably been the pitcher in the winning lineup had he not given up 3 runs in the 6th. If he got out of that 6th inning without giving up those runs, he would have a quality start and the win. You're looking at a giant score for him, but hey, he gave up that home run, and it cost him. Then hitting-wise, 4-man Oakland stack, 2-man Seattle, one off of a Boston and Josh Smith. Got it done. 295 was the winning score. I placed 10th, had 260. The not having, Sale hurt me a little bit, but the big thing was just not having Cal Riley. My lineup had a 4-man Cincinnati, 3-man Boston with a one-off of Jazz Chisenholm, who gave me 30. But I really needed that 53 from Cal Riley. And, even that, the 23 points would have made me shy of it. But at least a little bit closer there. All in all, congrats to LMFAO Your Face. You took it down. And I live to fight another day. A takedown is coming down one of these days. I'm seeing the board well. Just haven't got all the pieces yet So, all right, let's get over to DraftKings. We got Jose Quintana, who surprisingly had quite a game. He's had a couple over the last 5, but yesterday went 7 innings, no earned runs, 5 Ks, had a quality start, had a win, put up 28. And then you got Kikuchi. You have a 2-man Oakland stack, a 2-man Mariner stack. And if you notice, a lot of value hitters really went off. And so 4,500 was the salary needed, and it put up 300 or almost 300. Way less than normal salary spent there. Just kind of an outlier where there's that much chalk that goes off, but it happened. And then the winning lineup went to Termite, who put up 225.1. They had Kikuchi. They had Sale. They had a 4-man Seattle stack, 2-man Boston, and then a one-off with Josh Smith and McCormick, which got it done. They won by 4 points. So congrats to them. They won $50K. Let's move on to today's slate and check it out. 6 minutes, a little longer than normal. Sorry about that if you were in a rush, but put me on 1.5x, 2x, whatever. I know I talk a little slow at times. Now let's go. All right, we got Chris Bassett as the highest owned pitcher at 27% owned. He's in a decent spot versus the Giants, who just aren't good versus righties, so it makes a lot of sense to want to go here. And I like Bassett's game. Now, the one thing is his big-time games generally do happen at home. However, he's had a couple on the road. White Sox, Oakland, both good matchups, went for 26. He can absolutely do that in San Francisco versus the Giants. 3.5 FIP over both his last 5 and his last 20. The only issue with him is his K rate, 22.6%. But one of the things we've talked about with Bassett over and over again is his good games. He still manages to get that 6, 8, 7 Ks that you need. So while his K rate is low, he works a little deeper into most games than most pitchers, which gives you, the ability to get a couple more Ks with that. So I'm still interested in Bassett, even though we have a combined K rate of only 21%. I don't love that he's super high owned because he is, a little volatile. I think his floor is solid. His ceiling is solid, but his most likely outcome is 2023, and it's just not really going to be a difference maker at high ownership. I like Bassett, though. I wouldn't fade him, but I also wouldn't be pushing to get a ton of him. Nick Pavetta's next, 9.6K versus Oakland. One thing I got to talk about here is we got like 10 to 15 mile an hour winds blowing out towards, it's more like left center than just left here. And it's mid 80s. It is very, very good hitting weather. I really like Pivetta as a pitcher. He has huge ceiling, but super low floor also, which is great for GPPs. But when you're in a situation that he's high owned, it's a little more scary. And I want to bring your attention to this. Noticed I talked about the weather and the wind. We have 46% fly balls for his StatCast data, 8 barreled balls. So he's bottom 10% in barreled balls allowed, bottom 15% in average distance allowed, and then he's averaging 25% less fantasy points at home. This spells a little scary of a situation when it's going against an Oakland team that hits righties hard. Yeah, their WOBA is low, but their ISO 160. And then over the last 150 games, ISO is 183. 160 ISO also over the last 20 games. So I think it's an interesting spot with Pivetta. There is giant strikeout upside, but he allows a lot of fly balls, a lot of hard contact, and the chance of home run from Oakland is pretty high tonight. So it's going to be tough to figure out what you want to do with Pivetta. I would want to be on both sides of him in this spot. I think there's some leverage going with Oakland stacks. However, they probably are decently owned because the nature of Pivetta. But they're not going to be super high owned with Pivetta being, 25+% owned. So I like both sides of it. You can't knock this type of ceiling. 30 plus, he's done it multiple times. You have to get some of him. I just wouldn't go overboard in this situation because he's just as likely to put up single digits as he is 30, even though you have this Oakland matchup, which should be a very good matchup. Next, we got Framber Valdez, 8.3K, 2.1X, 5-star alert score. He is in just a great spot, and he's another guy that we have seen give us 30-plus points, multiple times. When he gets it going, he's in that 6 to 8K range and going 7 innings. His K rate's not very high, kind of very Bassett-like, as far as he can get those Ks, but it's due to him working longer in games. Miami, just not really scary. 22% K rate, low WOBA, low ISO. I don't mind the spot for Framber. He's too cheap for the ceiling that we have seen for him. We just haven't seen consistency out of him this year. Does it start coming? Maybe. I don't mind it. I like the price. Next, Charlie Morton versus the Diamondbacks. Chris Sale put on a clinic against them. He did well once again. Diamondbacks still got a couple runs on him, though. And now we're in a spot where we got Charlie Morton. He is not the pitcher that Sale is, and Arizona's been hitting righties much, much better. I don't love going to Morton in this spot. He's averaging 23% less fantasy points away. His ceiling games have pretty much all come at home outside of this one spot versus the Mets. Oh, okay game versus White Sox too, but outside of that, he's had more ceiling games away. I do worry about his ceiling a little bit in this spot versus Arizona, who is hitting the ball pretty well lately. And then you combine all that with a K rate that's 23.6%, and I just don't love it. Morton is not a guy that really works deep into games. He's not a guy that generally can get you 7, 8 innings. He's just not that efficient. But would I throw him out? No, but I'm definitely not trying to push extra of him in at his ownership. All right, Frankie Montas next. I don't think I will play Frankie Montas at all. He is 7X. But I just don't really think we have a ceiling here. Yes, he went nuts against Colorado in Colorado, getting 9 Ks and 7 innings. But I just don't think he can do that again. Now, the Rockies are not a great offense. They are terrible on the road, but we do have really warm weather and winds blowing out at Great American Small Park very, very hard, 10 to 15 miles an hour blowing out to center. There's going to be some home runs in this game, and Montas is giving them up. He has 9 barrel balls over the last month, 34% hard contact, 34% fly ball. I think it's a kind of an interesting game to use some Colorado. They have a high ISO. It is a very similar spot to Oakland, but Colorado likely goes less owned than Oakland, in my opinion. And thus, I think I would rather just play Colorado than I would Oakland. But I'm going to have some of both of them. All in all, I get it if you want to play there. The value's there. I just don't think the ceiling is there for him with how he's pitching right now. A guy has a FIP of 5 over the last 20 and over the last 5. I just don't think he's that great of a pitcher anymore. So for that, I'm out. He's at a little elevated ownership. I just can't really do it. Next, we got Logan Webb, 9.8K, 2.0X. I like the spot for Webb. I don't know if everybody will, but look, this guy is just amazing. 2.68 FIP over his last 20, 2.79 over the last 5, 22% K rate. StatCast data looks good. A few too many barreled balls here, but all in all, I really like it. I will point out that in 24 plate attempts, they're hitting 391 off him, but it's 24 plate attempts. That is one bad game. So I'm not holding that against them whatsoever. And then if you look at the opponent team splits for Toronto, 220, 166 ISO. So they're hitting hard righties hard, but like the WOBA, the average, all that's low. 22% K rate, 22% combined K rate. He can get it done. He can get you the score. He doesn't have the ceiling some of the other guys have, but his floor is way higher. I'm intrigued on Webb, especially if his ownership drops a little bit. After Webb, we really don't have much that I'm interested in. I want to talk about Gavin Stone because he's been so good lately. But we're talking about 15 to 20 mile an hour winds here in Philadelphia, blowing out towards left. And Philadelphia has Schwarber and Harper back. They have a 330 WOBA. Now, yeah, Gavin Stone has been much better away, but 47% fly balls versus a team that hits the ball very hard. It's just not a good situation for Gavin Stone today. The team splits heavily in the Phillies' favor. 296 average, 153 ISO, 350 WOBA. I think you can absolutely stack Phillies, and they might go a little lower owned than they should in this spot. Gavin Stone's been really good all year long, but I really just do not like this spot for him today. So I wanted to point that out. Also want to point out that Freeland has been better lately than most people think. Now, the weirdest and craziest stat, he's averaging 115% less fantasy points away. Somehow he's been better in Colorado. Now, it is pretty limited sample size here. He got crushed in Arizona his first start of the season. Got crushed in Chicago his second start of the season. Got crushed in Toronto. Then White Sox, he had an okay game, but just didn't rack up Ks. So his only two good starts of the season just happened to be at home. So I wouldn't put a huge emphasis on this 115% away thing, but it has been a thing right now. And Cincinnati's in an interesting spot with, winds blowing out and warm weather. Also, over the last 20 games versus lefties, they're hitting 270, 315 WOBA, 135 ISO. Not a bad situation for Cincinnati there. And Freeland just doesn't have the upside that I'm interested in. Wanted to more so talk about his pitching the hitting than anything else there. After all that, really not that into it. Got to talk about Waka probably, 7,600, 2.3x. He's been good, and this Cardinals offense has been hitting recently, but over the year they haven't been hitting that well. I think you could go to Waka as a low-owned pitcher if you want to tonight. 7,600 for what his ceiling is pretty low. I mean, it's a guy that can get you into high 20s, low 30s at 7.6 K, and the median projection on him is pretty good in this spot. So, a little intrigued by him for sure. Now, let's get over to FanDuel and talk about that situation. We got Nick Pivetta, your highest owned pitcher, 9K. So he is cheaper over here. He is 37% owned. I like both sides of that matchup. It's the same way here as it is on DraftKings. He is a little cheaper here, which makes him a little more enticing, but I think there's plenty of different ways to go. You don't have to go Pivetta in this spot. I am surely not going all Pivetta. Framber Valdez next, 9.8K. Our projection is higher than him. The consensus is lower. The alert score, 5 stars. So it's the best matchup on paper on FanDuel. And he's going a little lower owned. I think he's interesting, but you definitely don't have to have him. Charlie Morton, I don't love the spot for him, but at least he's 8.7K. Might have a little bit, not getting to much. Frankie Montas, I'm not getting there, even at only 10% owned. Logan Webb, Chris Bassett definitely are factors into today's pitching for me. I heavily will consider them. We haven't talked about Chris Sanchez, but he has been very good this season, and he's averaging 78% more fantasy points at home. The other thing to mention, 53% ground balls, 29% fly balls, 23% hard contact. If he's able to keep the ball in the ground versus the Dodgers, who absolutely crush lefties, he could have a good game even versus the Dodgers. Getting away from the home run weather is not a bad idea for him. So, am I going to play him? Maybe in a couple lineups of my 50, but I'm not going hard on him. But he is at least a little bit intriguing. So, now let's get back over to DraftKings, and let's talk some stacks. Our highest value play of the day is Oakland versus Nick Pivetta. This is not surprising me whatsoever, and we have them coming in super low owned. If they really are this low owned, I am absolutely playing some Oakland. There is giant leverage versus Pivetta, who is one of the highest owned pitchers and is a guy that we know can absolutely get blown up. So I will absolutely be playing some Oakland. Miami's popping up a little bit versus Framber. Framber's got beat up a little bit in the last couple of years, so I don't mind having a little of them as well. I'm not going overboard on Miami. On Oakland, I might go a little overboard on. Now, going into the highest owned stacks, we see Cincinnati all over the place versus Kyle Freeland. 5.25 FIP over his last 20, 3.29 over his last 5. Definitely makes some sense to want to go there with the hitting weather. Texas is also popping up versus Griffin Canning, who just hasn't been good this year, so that makes sense as well. Let's get over to the highest projected stacks. We have a lot of high game totals today. I think it's going to be a pretty fun, high-scoring slate. And our highest projected, we got Cincinnati versus Freeland, and the Mets versus our favorite punching bag in Patrick Corbin. Glad the Mets are popping up a little bit here. I want to bring your attention to, once again, very good hitting weather. Winds blowing out 15 to 20 mile an hour. It's warm. The ball is going to fly again to left. Francisco Lindor has been on absolute fire. The Mets have been hitting well. Nimmo's been hitting well. Definitely a bit intrigued to pick on Patrick Corbin, who has been decent lately with a 3.54 FIP, but we know who he is. He's an aging pitcher that isn't aging that gracefully. 5+ FIP. Definitely don't mind picking on him. Boston, JP Sears. He has a FIP of 6.82 over the last 5, 4.8 over the last 20. This Oakland bullpen is getting some extra work too, so if they have to get more extra work today, could be a little run down and really let Boston go nuts. With Boston only at 28% owned, they are super intriguing. It is a game total of 10, and they are the third biggest favorites on the slate, so their implied total is probably the highest on the slate. So, or it is the highest on the slate. So I would definitely be going with Boston. I bet they end up being quite a bit higher owned than that. Now, ceiling wise, we got a lot of ways to go today for ceiling, I would assume. And we got Mets, Boston, Dodgers popping up. So Mets, the ceiling is absolutely there versus Corbin. Ceiling's there for versus Sears. I don't know if the ceiling is necessarily there for Chris Sanchez. The reason being he allows so many ground balls. They're really going to have to get into that bullpen and make the bullpen work, I think, to really get after Sanchez. Sanchez is going to have to be very off, which at home, he just hasn't really been this year. Now, let's check the team. And highest implied total, 5.5 for Boston. 5.2 Cincinnati, 5.2 Mets, 5.1 for Philly, 5.1 for Texas. I think Philadelphia is probably going to go a little under-owned with such a high total. Boston obviously looks great. Cincinnati looks great. Love those spots. That Colorado bullpen is awful behind him. Washington bullpen isn't great either. The Dodgers bullpen is solid. However, any bullpen can really get hit. Texas, very interesting versus Griffin Canning. And that bullpen behind him is awful. And the bullpen just had a little bit of a bullpen game, so they've got some work recently as well. And then if Arizona can hit Morton, there's, some interest there. He's allowing decent amount of hard contact, decent amount of average exit velocity. It's intriguing. And then Slade, Ciccione, I don't mind trying to pick on him a little bit. He's been good with a 2.84 FIP over his last 5, but he has a 4.72 over the last 20. It's nothing to write home about. I don't mind picking on him or trying to pick on him a little bit with this Atlanta team that is trying to really start getting it going. So those are really all my main interests. I absolutely am interested in Oakland. 4.5 total versus Pivetta, who's chalk, I think is super interesting. Colorado is interesting. And then Washington. Severino hasn't been that great. And we got great hitting weather there. So you got to be a little enticed on that one as well, in my opinion. That will do it for today. We will be back tomorrow. I think we do have a small 4 or 5 game slate for Thursday night. So I should have a show tomorrow. Have a good one, guys. Good luck. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Helps a ton to just push that algo, push a few more views, and let me keep doing this and giving away free content for free. Have a good one, guys. Talk to you later. Peace.